Good morning. Our God is good, is He not? He has smiled on us on this day. He has blessed our worship. I have appreciated the last 2 weeks that I've been with you all in your season of worship. As you reflect on the God of heaven, I've had the privilege to share with you out of my own personal journey from my perspective. I've given you some historical perspective, but it's just been wonderful to match my historical perspective with your contemporary journey as well. This morning, I caught something in your singing, great God, great vision, and accomplishment. He is a great God, isn't He? Come on, Ned. He's a great God. He reigns forever. He reigns forever. He's a God of goodness, of grace, and mercy. And what a blessing it is to give Him praise. I appreciate your intentionality to give the God of heaven praise. It has been such an awesome privilege. As I sit amongst your presence, sit in your company, and I hear testimony, I hear your prayer concerns, I can't help but think about my own journey. And so I want to share with you a little bit more, move a little bit further, and perhaps bring some closure to my life with God and to my life. I told you before, my name is Joseph. For those of you who were not here the first 2 weeks, if you aren't sure, if you want to know more about me, start reading in the 37th chapter in the book of Genesis. Moses has written my life story, but you know what? Nobody can tell your story better than you. And so I thought I would just tell some more of this journey. God is a great God. He's a God of great vision, which means that God sees what we cannot see. And when God sees what we cannot see, not only does He see things, but God allows what we do not understand. And sometimes God allows things that bring us pain, they bring us discomfort, they bring us misery. God can allow the unthinkable to happen in our lives. But just as sure as God can allow the unthinkable, God can also do the unthinkable. Anybody in here, have you ever felt like you are living in a season and you don't know how you got there? You are experiencing things you never thought that you would experience. Are you perhaps enjoying life in a measure that you never thought was possible for you? Or maybe you are in a place now where things are coming together for you. Things are working out, but you can remember a time when you didn't think that things would ever get any better for you. Anybody ever had that experience before? Come on now, I need your help this morning. If you would talk with me and respond and affirm what I'm saying, I know that I'm in good company. That you are in a place now, but you can remember like it was yesterday. You were in a very different place. You didn't look as good as you look right now. Perhaps you didn't dress as well as you dress right now. There were times maybe you didn't even know your own name. You didn't have your own right mind. But thanks be to God, the God of goodness and the God of mercy, the God of grace. If it had not been for Him, you know you wouldn't be where you are today. That's my testimony. It was nobody but God who was there with me in the hole where my brothers placed me. Nobody but God who was there with me in Potiphar's house. For Moses said, the Lord was with me. But I tell you, life still took another turn for me. I told you about how it went down with Miss P and Master P. It threw me into prison. But guess what? You know, God shows up in prison too. Somebody knows about that. You see, I was a prisoner. I was in prison, but I wasn't a prisoner. Let me tell you what that means. See, to be in prison, you are confined. Your freedom is taken from you When you are in prison, you lose some identity and individuality. When in prison, people limit you, they label you, they even try to call themselves giving you discipline, punishing you in prison. And so you can be in prison, but you don't have to be a prisoner. Because I believe that you can have an imprisoned state of mind. You can have the freedom of your limbs. You can think and walk and drive, but still be confined, locked up here, where you don't see clearly, can't think clearly. In fact, there are people who maybe they look free on the outside, but they are in bondage on the inside. They cannot see anything better for themselves. They cannot see beyond their present reality. They believe that this is it for their lives. I was in prison, but I was not a prisoner. I felt like God had more for me. Potiphar could lock me away. He could throw away the key, but some kind of way, God would make things right. Because you see, I didn't serve Potiphar, I served God. And don't you know what happened? God showed up in prison. And not only was I in prison, but God gave me favor in prison. And so in prison, guess what? I also had authority. I was in prison, but I was able to tell people where to go, what to do, how to do it. I had respect because the Lord was with me. The prison guards did not bother me because they saw that the Lord was with me. See, it doesn't matter where you are as long as God is with you. And if God is with you, people handle you differently. When God is with you, people can say what they want about you, but there's just some things God won't allow to happen to you. Maybe somebody knows something about that. That life took you to a dark place, but God was there. And so the darkness around you did not confine or constrict you, but God still blessed you. And while other people suffered, you were still being blessed. Maybe there's somebody here, and right now you find yourself in prison. But I tell you, though in prison, don't be a prisoner. While I was there were two gentlemen. They worked for Pharaoh. I served Potiphar, and Potiphar served Pharaoh. Pharaoh was king in all of Egypt. Potiphar was just over the Egyptian guard. Potiphar was the chief executioner, but Pharaoh was king. As from an Egyptian's perspective, Pharaoh may as well have been God. Pharaoh had fallen out with his chief cupbearer and his chief baker. He had become disappointed with them, and he ordered them to be imprisoned. And I'm not going to say it was by coincidence. I'm not going to say it just so happened. I'm going to say that God so aligned the affairs in our lives that they would be placed in the same prison where I was. There are no coincidences in the economy of God. God can take you from any corner of the planet and place you in the way of any blessing that he wants to send. And it may look like a curse. It may look like hardship. It may look like inconvenience. It may look like mistreatment. But in the economy of God, it can and will be for your blessing and your benefit. These brothers were there with me in prison. And one day I noticed that they had a dejected, downcast look on their faces. I asked them what's going on. They said they both had dreams the previous night together. They both had separate dreams. And they said they were troubled because they didn't know what the dreams meant. I shared with them. I said, well, I have some experience in dreams. After all, I believe it was dreams that got me in this place in the first place. I was dreaming, and I told my brothers about my dream, and they threw me in a hole. And from my dreams, they took me to the hole, and then from the hole, they took me into Potiphar's house, and then from Potiphar's house, it put me in prison. Tell me about your dreams. Well, the cupbearer said, I had a dream. There were 3 vines. There were 3 branches, and it yielded grapes. I took the grapes, crushed them, created sweet wine, and gave that wine to Pharaoh. I don't know what that means. I said, well, you said there were 3 vines. I tell you what, within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head He will restore you, and you once again will be his cupbearer. The baker perked up. He heard the cupbearer's dream, and he said, well, I'll tell you about my dream. I had 3 baskets stacked on top of my head. The top basket had bread in it, but the birds came and they would eat the bread from the basket. What does that mean? What's going to happen to me? Tell me. I paused. I said, well, I've got good news, and you won't like the rest of the news. But here it goes. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will come, and he will lift off your head. Pharaoh will order your execution. You will be hanged from a tree, and the birds will come and eat of your intestines. That is your dream. You know what happened? In 3 days, Pharaoh had a birthday party. At his birthday party, the cupbearer and the baker were present. And sure enough, just as I shared with them, the cupbearer was restored. He was restored to his full order before his imprisonment, but not so for the baker. The baker was executed. He was hanged from a tree, and birds came and they ate of his insides. After seeing that, when I interpreted this dream for the cupbearer, I told him, I said, you will be restored. And when you're restored, please remember me. I wish I could tell you that as soon as the cupbearer was restored, he remembered me. But he didn't. I was forgotten. Has anyone ever been forgotten before? You know what it means to be forgotten? Nobody comes to check on you when you're forgotten. When you're forgotten, nobody shows concern for you. In fact, I served the cupbearer. I helped the cupbearer, helped him advance, and he forgot me. There'll be people who you will serve and you will help and you will invest in and you will do for them and you will bless them, and they will forget you. Yes, I was disappointed, but I also knew, but there is one who will never forget. There is somebody who never loses track, never loses sight, who is always aware of exactly where you are, what your circumstances are, and he knows how to meet your needs. I'm talking about the one who was with me, the Lord, God, Jehovah. He was there. But you know what? Do you know the cupbearer left me in that prison and another 2 years passed? 2 years. The cupbearer was out there living life, enjoying his freedom. It hurts, doesn't it, when you see people who you helped and they seem to wave it in your face. People who you have helped and you've invested in, and they didn't have enough courtesy just to tell you thank you. The cupbearer was enjoying his life, but you know what? Something happened. Pharaoh started having dreams. I tell you, I don't know what it is about me and dreams. Pharaoh had dreams and he was troubled. Because he's Pharaoh, he had magicians all around him. He had the best of counselors and everybody at his disposal. And he ordered all of them to come around him and to interpret his dreams. None of them were capable. But I tell you what, somebody remembered me. The cupbearer, asking for forgiveness, said, Pharaoh, I have been unfair, but I do remember. There was a time where you put me in prison, and while in prison I had a dream, and there was a Hebrew there in prison who interpreted my dream correctly. He foresaw, he foretold that I would be restored just as you did, and it came to pass. And it was Pharaoh sent for me. I don't know what was going on. The prison guard came and told me, you've been summoned by Pharaoh. I didn't know what to expect. I knew I had done nothing wrong. But considering the trajectory of my life, I figured somebody else had wrongfully accused me of something else. There was more trouble on the horizon, so I just thought, well, what is it now? I was on my way. Pharaoh explained his predicament to me. He said, listen, I've had a series of dreams, and they are troubling me. I was standing by the Nile River, and up out of the Nile came 7 fat cows. They were healthy cows. They were splendid in all of their physique. They were perfect, 7 of them. But just as the last one came up, 7 gaunt, ugly, skinny, malnourished cows also came from the Nile. These 7 cows, they ate the 7 healthy cows, but they stayed skinny. They stayed ugly. I woke up troubled, but then I fell back asleep. I had another dream. It was 7 grains of wheat, 7 of them healthy, flourishing, full. And then there were another 7. They were scorched. They were malnourished, unhealthy. And those unhealthy, scorched stalks ate the 7 healthy stalks, but they never looked healthy themselves. The dream haunts me and troubles me. Can you interpret my dream? I told Pharaoh straight up. I said, I can't interpret your dream, but God can. And I shared with him 7 fat cows, 7 healthy stalks of grain. Egypt will experience 7 years of plenty. 7 years of harvest. 7 years things will be well in the land of Egypt. 7 gaunt, malnourished cows. 7 scorched stalks of wheat. For another 7 years, there will be famine in Egypt. Not just famine in Egypt, there will be famine in all the world. Prepare yourself. If Pharaoh is wise, Pharaoh will appoint someone to be governor in Egypt who will collect all of the grain, who will collect a portion of the grain from every citizen and will store the grain in preparation for and in anticipation of the famine that is to come. If Pharaoh were wise, he would appoint this person. Pharaoh talked with his advisors, and they tried to put their heads together. They could not think of who could be the person who could serve Pharaoh in Egypt in this capacity. Remember, I asked you a question. Have you ever gotten somewhere and never saw yourself being there before? You ever find yourself living a life that you couldn't have written yourself? Beyond your wildest dreams, you're doing something. Pharaoh looked at me. He said, you know what? You interpreted this dream. You gave us this wisdom. I cannot think of a better person. I want to appoint you, a Hebrew, as governor in Egypt. I don't want to just make you somebody who's over grain. I want you to be my second in command. In other words, that anything that happens in Egypt, it won't happen unless Joseph says it can happen. I went from being my father's youngest son, despised and hated by my brothers, to being sold into slavery, to being subservient in Potiphar's house in a foreign land, and then being promoted to being the chief slave in Potiphar's house, most trusted in all of Potiphar's house, back to prison, trusted in prison, and from prison, here I am, governor of all of Egypt. Nobody but God can do that. Great vision, great accomplishment. Only one who reigns forever can orchestrate the affairs of life that way. Only the God of heaven can take you from your obscurity and put you in a place of prominence. Only God can take you out of your place of darkness, your place of torment, your place of isolation, because it's in darkness and in isolation where God is building your character. God is depositing within your spirit. God is forming and shaping and molding you for a purpose that's bigger than yourself. You thought that it was a waste of your time, that people were passing you by and stepping over you, but God was just getting you ready. Maybe somebody today, right now, you are frustrated, but I'm telling you, be faithful unto God, because God never forgets. God knows where his children are. God knows where his servants are. God knows where the broken are. God knows where the afflicted are. And when the time is right, when God gets ready, God knows where to get you. And so all you got to do is be ready when God comes looking. Be ready when God comes. Be ready when God shows up. Be ready. I was ready, y'all. Pharaoh wanted to promote me. I'd had enough of prison. I'd had enough of eating prison food. I'd had enough of the confinement. Now I was ready to walk into my destiny. It was time now, and still I knew that I was promoted, but I had no idea what God was going to do. Pharaoh brought me out of prison, made a personal trip, escorted me out, had a public ceremony installing me as governor of all of Egypt. There, in front of everyone, Pharaoh gave me a signet ring. The signet ring gave me authority, seal of authority. He gave me a golden necklace and medallion. And you know what Pharaoh also gave me? He gave me a linen robe. Boy, I tell you, can't nobody do it but God. God had orchestrated this thing so that that same boy who wore a coat of many colors, God knew I had good shoulders and they were meant for more than bowing down under somebody else's whip. But God had constructed me and built me so that I could stand tall and represent him and wear priestly garments, ornately garments well. But it wasn't about me. It was about God. Pharaoh gave me a fine linen robe, and I knew how to wear a linen robe because, see, my daddy gave me a coat of many colors, and I got practice. So I put the robe on. 7 years. We'd done well. I started calculating. I was 17 years old when my brothers sold me. I was 30 years old when Pharaoh promoted me. 13 years. My life had been up and down. 13 years. I hadn't seen my brothers or my father in 13 years. 13 years I had seen people come and go. I had ordered people around. I had eaten the best food, and I'd eaten the worst food. 13 years. For the next 7 years, things were lovely in Egypt. Everything was well. I represented Pharaoh well. The people, the nation of Egypt, they loved me because I dealt with people fairly. I dealt with people fairly because I knew that's what God expected of me. I served God, not Pharaoh. Don't allow yourself to be blinded by promotion. Don't allow yourself to be so consumed by your promotion that you lose sight of the fact that there is one who has allowed you to be promoted. The point is, do not allow pride to get in the way, because you know success can be intoxicating. Success can rob and steal you of potential if you are not careful. And so I served God. 7 years, we did well. 7 years, I collected grain from everyone in proportion to their earnings. I stored it. We had grain on top of grain. It got to the point we just stopped counting how much we had. But we still collected because I knew that one day famine would come. And sure enough, when year 7 had come to an end, things changed in all of Egypt. The people started running out of grain. Pharaoh told me, he said, Joseph, you told us this would happen, and you prepared us. Now sell grain to the Egyptians. I sold grain to everyone in Egypt. Again, I dealt with people fairly. I did not extort anyone. I represented God well. I represented Pharaoh well. But the famine was not just in Egypt. The famine swept across the world. People came from all around, and they had to come to see me. They needed grain. People needed to eat. People were starving. And so they had to come and see a Hebrew in Egypt who was governor. Somebody in here right now, you are a Hebrew serving as governor in Egypt. I know you're confused. What does that mean? You are holding a position that you are not qualified to hold. You hold a position of prominence that you know that you don't have capacity. You couldn't open the door for yourself. You constantly looking over your shoulder because you don't want anyone to find out. I tell you, don't worry about it because God placed you. You didn't beat down doors. You didn't have to be conniving and cunning. You didn't have to talk your way into the position. I served my way into the position. I served God my way into the position. So when others ask you, how did you get to be such and such and such and such, just tell them it was the God of heaven who opened the door for me, gave me the sense to step right in, to receive what he has for me. And so I'm not here by my own merit, but I'm here by his grace. And from there, how may I serve you? It was one day. Every day was the same day. People were coming from all around, and they were coming to be served. But one day, some gentlemen came in. I believe it was 10 of them. They came in. They were desperate. I overheard the conversation in the outer chamber before they were escorted into my presence. It said, we have come from Canaan. Our father is old, and he's still there with our younger brother. We have run out of grain, and we're starving, and we were told by our father there's grain in Egypt. And he told us to get here immediately. We have come that we might see the governor and have audience with him, that we might return back to our home and our father with grain so that we may live. My servants escorted them into my presence. There they were, my brothers. My brothers, the same ones, some 20 years ago, sold me. They faked my death, told my father I was dead, which meant that if they were willing to tell my father who loved me to death, if they were willing to tell my father that I was dead, then I was dead to them. They didn't recognize me. But you know what they did? And I kind of chuckled to myself. When they saw me, they came and they knelt before me. I chuckled because, y'all, I had a dream. I had a dream, and I didn't know what it meant, but I told them. I said, I had a dream that I had 12. There were 12 stalks. And there was another stalk, my stalk. And your 12 stalks bowed down to me. I didn't know what it meant. But when I saw my brothers kneeling in my presence, I couldn't help but chuckle and say, okay, Lord, I see what you're doing. They asked me for grain, and I told them, get up. I don't believe you. You guys are spying. You're trying to see how we have protected ourselves because you want to come back and raid us and take everything that we have. They had the audacity to tell me, no, sir, we are trustworthy men. How dare they call themselves trustworthy when you sold me, your own brother, and lied to your father and my father about my death, and you have the gall to stand in my presence and tell me that you're trustworthy? said, how do I know you're trustworthy? They said, we're trustworthy. He said, well, you said that there was 12 of you, but there's only 10 of you standing here. They said, well, our youngest brother's back at home, and we have another brother who's now deceased. Oh, you got another brother at home. I tell you what, you know what? Because I don't believe you, I'm going to put all of you in prison. And I'm going to send one of you back. And I want you to come back and show and prove to me that you are trustworthy. We went back and forwards a little bit more. Finally, they said, oh, Lord, let us go back, and we will speak to our father and share with him what you have shared with us, and we will bring our younger brother back. I said, I'll tell you what, that one right there, that one, what's his name? It said Simeon. Simeon's going to stay with me. Simeon stayed. I had my guards bind him, lock him away in the prison. I sent them on their way. Little did they know. They came with silver because they wanted to purchase their grain honestly. I had their silver put back in their bags. I sent them on their way. While on their journey, they noticed that the silver was in their bags. They were frightened all over again. They said, certainly this curse is upon us. The Lord is fine. It's caught up with us because of what we did to young Joseph. Now we are being punished. Nevertheless, they went back to my father. They explained to my father everything. It broke my father's heart. He said, I've already lost one son, my favorite son. Rachel gave me another son, Benjamin. Joseph was my youngest at the time. Now Benjamin is my baby boy. I can't lose two baby boys. Judah spoke up. He said, Father, listen, that governor in Egypt does not play. So Benjamin gonna have to come with us, and I will take personal responsibility for him. If anything happens to Benjamin, you can hold me responsible and hate me forever. So my brothers got everything together. They waited for some time. They waited till the grain that they brought back was all gone. They waited till they got hungry again. They came back with Benjamin. For the first time in my life, I was laying eyes on my mother's second child, Benjamin. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I had to step outside of the room as I wept. I had my guards prepare a meal for us at noon. I wanted them to dine with me in my private chambers. What would you have done? The very people who betrayed you, ordered you, they plotted your own death and demise and lied to your father. Now they stand in your presence in need of you, and you hold the answers to their survival. What do you do? What do you do? You have the chance now. You can break them. You can destroy them. You can have your way with the very people who are responsible for all of the pain in your life. The people who have caused you the greatest misery. The people who are the reason for you losing what you've lost, missing out on what you've missed out on. I lost a significant portion of my life because of these men. And here they stand before me. In fact, they're kneeling in my presence, in need of me for their own survival. And as I told you before, God has a way of taking the people who have done you wrong, and now those people will need you for their own survival. Let that be a lesson to us all. Be careful how you treat people, because you never know. Life has a way of turning around, and you will find yourself in need, and the very people who are threatened by you are the people who will need you to survive. There they were, kneeling before me. I couldn't take it anymore. I ordered everyone out of the room. It was nobody but me and my brothers. And finally I said, Judah, Simeon, Naphtali, Zebulun, Don't remember all their names, just like 11 of them. Benjamin, Reuben, Gad, Dan. Look at me. They looked at me. Silence. I said, look at me good. They still looked. Some of them, they had food all over their front of them. Because they ate well. They ate well. They just food everywhere. Just disgusting. They were hungry. They were men. I said, look at me. Do you know who I am? They looked harder. I said, about 20 years ago, you had a brother. You hated him because you knew your father loved him more than he loved you. Your brother loved you guys to death. He also loved his father to death. He wrestled with trying to balance the love for his father and the love for his brothers. His father put him in a very difficult position. He was a dreamer. He had big dreams. Unfortunately, he didn't share his dreams in a way that would flatter you. You despised him all the more. You sold him. As far as you were concerned, he was dead. I'm Joseph. I'm your brother. The one whose destiny you were so threatened by. That same destiny is the key to your salvation. The one who you no longer wanted to live, God has preserved and protected so that you might live. Don't be afraid. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. I know that some of you here, and you're thinking, I need you to do this for me. I need you to think about the person who you know you can hold responsible for the pain in your life. I want you to see their faces. I want you to go back to the place where they betrayed you. I want you to see their faces, and I want you to see now what God has done with you since then. See how God has watched over you, protected you, held you together, how he's advanced you. It hasn't been easy for me. Let me tell you, it's been prison. It's been prison twice. It's been wrongfully accused once. It's been forgotten once. It's not an easy journey, but I thank God for it because it all makes sense now. You see, God uses all of the drama, all of the pain, all of the heartache, all of the hardship, all of the destruction, all of the forgottenness, all of the brokenness, all of the tears. Every tear that you shed, the Lord counts it, remembers it, holds it, preserves, and keeps it for a time when he is ready to bring it to your knowledge, to your foreknowledge, so you can understand that God's invisible hand was at work all along. My flesh wanted me. My flesh wanted me so bad to torture my brothers, to stand them up and parade them publicly and tell them these men have betrayed me. They betrayed their own father. They betrayed their own people. These men, they do not deserve to live. And therefore, I personally will execute them publicly. My flesh wanted to do so. But God told me, no. In fact, don't be mad with them. Now it's time for you to thank them. Because they were the ones who got the ball rolling for you. You are governor of all of Egypt. So don't worry about how you got there. Just know where you are. In fact, how you got there was all about how I wanted you to get there. So you ought to thank them for being faithful and allowing God to use them. You got to find a way to be grateful even for your enemies. Maybe you never thought that. Never thought that your enemies would be useful and valuable, but somewhere later on after my life, a king by the name of David wrote a psalm, and he said something about that the Lord would make your enemies your footstool. My brothers were bowing down before me. My feet, I could have put my feet on my brothers. But God, the great God with vision and power and strength, they meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. They meant it for my destruction, but God meant it for their deliverance. They meant it for your destruction, but God meant it for his glory. If it had not been for God, if it had not been for God in the hole, God in the palace, God in the prison, God in the famine, but God, nobody but God, nobody but God. Do I have some but God circumstances out there? Do I have some but God testimonies out there? Can anybody out there say it was nobody but God? Did they talk about you? Did they lie on you? Did they tell you you wouldn't make it? But God, here you are, serving, shining, standing tall. You don't look like what you've been through. You don't look like where you come from. But thanks be to God. Hey, I feel something in here. God was there every step of the way, molding me and making me into what he desires me to be. And so for that brother, that sister, right now you're feeling forgotten. You're feeling like no one loves you, no one cares. You're feeling like nobody's going to by and check on you. I want you to know that there is a God who remembers. There is a God who never forgets. And all you got to do is be ready for that day when those people will come back around who said you couldn't make it. And they will need you so that they can make it. And you know what? You ain't got to throw it in their face. You just serve them and love them. Because you know there was another story and about a man named Jesus. And they talked about him too. And they lied on him too. And they cheated him too. They whipped him too. And they beat him too. And they nailed him to a cross. And they hung him up in front of everybody to see. But he didn't talk bad about them. He didn't talk down to them. He didn't beat none of them up. In fact, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It was by the will of God that Jesus had to die. But he didn't stay there. Because on early Sunday morning, but God, he got up with all power in his hands. It may be somebody here, and maybe you don't know, but this is your testimony. This is your journey. You walking through your Friday night, but I got good news for you. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Sunday morning is on its way. Redemption is on its way. Deliverance is on its way. Healing is on its way. Because God is on his throne. And he reigns forever, 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 and ever. God bless you, New Hope. God bless you. God bless you, New Hope.